A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Paro session in the International Conference on Media and Communication, or you can call as Mention 2021. My name is Sharon Tang, and I will be your MC for today. And here with me, I'm assisted by Hasnina as my technical. Today, this is the session of A5 with the theme of Systematic Literature Review 2. And the chairperson for this session will be Mr. Muhammad Zaidi bin Abu Zaman. Hello, Mr. Zaidi. Welcome.
Hi, Sharon. Hi, all.
Hello. Hi. All right. So for today, we have 4 paper presenters. Please bear in mind, each presenter is given 10 to 15 minutes of presentation time, and you guys are required to stay in the session room until all the presenters are done with the presentation. So if any of the presenter could not give a live presentation due to the internet problems, please do not worry. We will play the video of your presentation, and I hope that the presenter is available for question and answer for session later. Without further ado, I will pass this session to Mr. Zaidi. Over to you, Mr. Zaidi.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Hi, Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. Welcome to 17th Biennial Information Conference on Media and Communication, Mention 2021. My name is Muhammad Zaidi Abu Zaman from University Kebangsaan Malaysia, and today I will be moderating this live paper session. This is the Group B5 session with theme Systematic Literature Review 2, and with me here, our special guests, there are 4 presenters. Please welcoming Associate Professor Dr. Aida Mokhtar from International Islamic University Islam Malaysia, Madam Fazura binti Mustafa from University Kebangsaan Malaysia, Miss Duan Kwan from University Putra Malaysia, and Mr. Zul Imran bin Ahmad also from University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes that today's session is being recorded. If you have any question for the presenter, please use the chat feature in the Zoom after the Q&A after the session. Then each presenter today will have a total of 50 minutes for their presentation. And however, we will hold most questions until the end of the session. Okay, now please welcome our first presenter, Associate Professor Dr. Aida Mokhtar from Kuliah of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Science, International Islamic University Malaysia, speaking about the systematic literature review of studies on communication and COVID-19 and agenda setting theory perspective. Dr. Aida, please welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, now thank you so much for introducing me. Right, so today I am presenting our paper, and what's happened is, let me take this off. Okay, what's happened is basically, of course, we've got this COVID-19 pandemic still happening, and it isn't going away, really, isn't it? Right, so there's a lot of communication on it, and more than 5 million people have passed away worldwide as of today, and it's very contagious, and it's spread, and it's affected us in many ways. We've had several lockdowns, and there's so many restrictions have happened, and it's just now that we one of the few times that we feel a little bit freer, isn't it, right, in Malaysia, and we can travel further. Of course, it's for our own good. Yeah. So vaccinations have been rolled out. And of course, now we're talking about the booster shots and so forth for some of us. And the first pill designed to treat symptomatic COVID has been approved by the UK medicines regulator, and it's called Molnupiravir, and will be given twice a day to vulnerable patients recently diagnosed with the disease. So with all of this happening, we were interested in looking at what sort of research has been done, really. And the preview of points, introduction, research questions, materials and methods, analysis phase, and results and discussion. Now, the research questions were formed with the agenda setting theory in mind. So what were the key findings of the studies, right? Which research method was favored most when we talk about research on COVID-19 and communication? What were the recommendations given, or how worthy is the study? Right. So when we talk about agenda, and I was thinking when I do my research, I like to use a theory, of course. That's how I was trained. And even, when I teach my students to do campaigns, they have to adopt a model even, right? When they do their integrated marketing communication campaign, they have to adopt a model because it just gives, value to the research in this case, and it gives it a certain perspective and parameters to work within. So I felt that was so interesting to do, and hence we decided to adopt the agenda setting theory because I wanted to look at the salient aspects of the research, the salient elements of the research. And agenda setting theory is usually used to examine news stories, isn't it, on what salient topics are focused on by the media that affect people by making them think in a certain way. But in this case, we adapted according to this kind of study, where we look at the salient features of a research study. And of course, the salient features, I realized, at first I put down, I want to look at the theory aspect, the theory that was adopted by everybody, all of the researchers. And then I wanted to look at, that. And then I realized that's not the salient feature of the study, because if you look at the abstract and if you look at, they have somewhat like an extended abstract, isn't it, on some papers. What happens is it doesn't quite cover theory in a lot of articles that I went through. So in terms of agenda setting, in reflecting what candidates are saying, and I'm a person who likes to use theories in different ways. That's one thing, as you can see, nobody possibly used agenda setting theory, but I like to use it. So, even I'm more, of course, into advertising as well as social communication. So I also like to use, theories that have never been used for those areas. In terms of agenda setting, in reflecting what candidates are saying during a campaign, the mass media may well determine the important issues. That is, the media may set the agenda of the campaign. So this is in the case of course, us reading through the articles, the research studies, and a study using agenda setting focused on major and minor issues. So there's this idea of major and minor issues found in the mass media, and major issues tend to be news stories or issues that are given prominence in the media, right? In terms of, where they're placed, right? The front section, for example, the length of the article, so the thing is, and then the minor issues, of course, is everything else that's not focused on a lot. It's basically the issue that's not given a lot of prominence. So we're more interested in the major aspect, the major subject matters found in the mass media as communicated by political parties, determined by their placement as the lead story, for example. So if it's something has been made the lead story, an issue, then it's a major issue. In this study, the major issues or subjects relate to the elements of a paper that would be of greater interest to an academician. So I adapted it according to that. So I realized that these were the salient aspects of the articles, which were a little easier to extract from previous studies and previous publications compared to articles that, like if it came to theory, some studies did not have theory. If it came to, or they were embedded in the article, right? Or they could be mentioned in the abstract. But the thing was, I went for the ones that were most obvious and most salient from the abstract. So research methods, findings, recommendations, or value of the research. And of course, it did make me go through the article as well. So the materials and methods more was in terms of the literature search. It was carried out, and the keywords communication COVID-19 were used. So this was basically done, and my partner did that. Studies were from January 2020 to August 2021, and sources were mainly from the Google Scholar database. So there were criteria. Full text articles were selected. They had to be empirical studies, so no conceptual papers were allowed and written in English. So they had to be, ready full text articles. Now 37 items were found. There were 37 items were found that sort of fit through the criteria, sort of, meaning they were full text, they were in English, and they were available online for free. However, only after sifting through, only 15. So after going through more than 37 articles, only 37 sort of fit in, but not quite there until I scrutinized each one. And then I realized only 15 fit into the criteria, which was rather disappointing. And the themes and codes were identified using Clark et al.'s approach, 2016. And of course, in this case, I simplified it a bit. So the theme was basically the codes were more detailed, right? The themes were straightforward, and they went by the elements that I was going for. And of course, I was flexible about it. And anything that went beyond what I expected, I took in as well, because I'm a very, this is more of an inductive study, right? And then I was willing to go for anything that went beyond my expectations, really, in terms of the findings. And in vivo was used to analyze the data. So in terms of the findings, so the theme here, I put there, findings. When I, finish writing the paper proper, I would, somehow think about this, whether the themes would still be findings or something else. And there were several codes that came about from those 15 articles. Now, online teaching affects communication of teachers and students, right? Greater digital technology use causes depression. 5 types of humans were created, the types, the categories were created during COVID-19, and then the communication strategies for each segment. Understanding the effects of risk communication and trust in media. Of course, we talk about risk communication because of the COVID situation, and that comes up quite a bit. Digital and the whole idea of digital communication comes up quite a bit. Increase with family for some and decrease for some people. The whole idea of face coverings negatively impacting understanding, hearing, engagement, and feelings of connection with the speaker were also part of the findings of a study. High percentage of Chinese exposed to risk communication also adopted preventive behaviors, and communication affected their behavior. Key themes, right, found in online communication, online messages, change tourist risk perception, all about tourism, and how there was anxiety in terms of cancellation of flights, and that brought about anxiety. And then the whole idea of racism was also brought about, and questioning whether the media coverage was authentic or not, it was accurate or not. So things like that, it seems to be quite a bit of issues. It seems to be a very negatively perceived communication online that's been happening. And these were the key themes that were derived from over 10,000 online communication messages that were researched on by one researcher, by one paper, one study. Mainstream media used most will affect opinion of the government positively. So these were the things. Now, what I found was from here was basically we found that mental health, was an issue. There's a lot of negativity, stress that came about that was found to be affected by communication. The effectiveness of communication is also questioned, like online teaching affects communication of teachers and students, and like how the study recommended that informal communication also be carried out rather than the formal, Google Meet, Zoom kind of stuff. But at the side, teachers should also communicate through WhatsApp personally to their students and so forth, to allow for informal communication, because of the ineffectiveness of online communication in a formal sense only happening. If that only happens, it's not really that effective, and the whole idea of the digital media and how that is used, that's also something that was brought up quite a bit. And face coverings, and how that affected people as well. And mainstream media as well, and how, you know, the media affects people's opinions and perceptions a lot at this point, and how mainstream media, owned, I assume, by the government, right, would be affected the government in a way, affected opinion of the government positively. Now, it came to the research methods, which was also for me an element, the salient element of the studies. And a lot of the studies focused on online surveys because I suppose it is during the COVID pandemic situation. So online surveys and content analysis were done quite a bit. There were some studies which mentioned survey, but did not mention specifically whether it was online or not. And then qualitative content analysis. So online surveys were quite popular. Results and discussion. So when you talk about, recommendations or value. So some studies said they were going to recommend something, but they didn't. They spoke about not in terms of recommending as in this is the issue, the communication issue, and hence this is the recommendation in relation to the communication issue, more of this is the recommendation of a future research, for example, or the value. I found that the value was also important to look at, the value of the research. So the whole idea of disease awareness among pharmacists as well as risk perception must be considered. So while, you know, planning for effective risk communication, you need to focus on risk perception, yeah, and disease awareness. You must research on them first. A study promotes the delivery of relevant, accurate, and sensitive information to key public groups, minimizing communication noise to guide desirable coordinated actions. The whole idea of effectiveness, you know, gearing for effective communication during this COVID pandemic is also something that was highlighted. We recommend that future work addresses the mass media's actual impact on readers during the COVID-19 crisis through sentiment analysis of news data. So that is future work, right? That should look into sentiment analysis of news data, something other than that was researched on. So the impact on readers, mass media impact on readers during the COVID crisis. Study emphasizes importance of communication in crisis management and looks at how positive and consistent messaging inspires confidence and social solidarity. You know, seems to come out a lot as well. I mean, in another study, this whole idea of social solidarity, confidence, self-efficacy, you know, are really areas which seem to be focused on when you look at the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So how to inspire, and in this, we're facing hard times, and how to inspire confidence and social solidarity as we fight, you know, beat COVID, and a call to action to these experts to develop communication-friendly face coverings so that communication is more effective. So the recommendations have focused on the effectiveness of communication. Now, other than that, future risk communication practices are recommended to better monitor population risk perceptions and pay attention to socio-demographically disadvantaged people. So it's a different segment of people that we should look at. And again, the whole idea of risk communication practices and what they should focus on to monitor the population risk perceptions is also something that should be monitored and has been recommended. So this is something that, you know, we need to focus on. In conclusion, there were a variety of codes found in the salient features of previous empirical studies on communication and COVID-19, and the trends were found mostly on COVID communication affects opinions and perceptions greatly, right? So be very wary about, you know, the effects of COVID communication, because it can affect people's opinions about the government. They make people question whether or not it's authentic or not. You know, and the news that's coming through is authentic or not. People question all of that. And, you know, it's really important for future researchers and communicators to focus on giving out a positive and communication that is communicated in such a way that's effective under the great stress that we all feel, isn't it, right? Online surveys were popularly used, my students as well. We're doing interviews, we're doing it online, and they were popularly used. And this was found in quite a lot of studies. Recommendations for future studies focusing on the impact. Yeah, there were several recommendations for future studies focusing on the impact of such communication. Again, it's the communication effectiveness at this time, and risk communication seems to be the focus. How to get it done effectively, how to create a less stressful environment to live in, isn't it, right? And how to come up with something. And the fact is that we should come up with something that is more authentic and reassure people. The credibility of information is also questioned. Okay, so that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the excellent presentation, Doctor. If you have questions for Associate Professor Dr. Aida, please add them in the chat room. Okay, now let's please welcome the second presenter, Madam Fazura binti Mustafa. She is a PhD student, Faculty Humanity and Social Science, the Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, with title Sorotan Literature Bersistematik Kepimpinan Transformasional dalam Organisasi Awam di Malaysia. Okay, please welcome.
Terima kasih kepada pengerusi majlis. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat petang. Okey, tajuk saya untuk pembentangan saya pada petang ini adalah sorotan literature bersistematik kepimpinan transformasi dalam organisasi awam di Malaysia. Saya buat kerja ini bersama penyedia saya, Dr. Maizatul Haizan Mahmud dan juga Profesor Madya Wan Amiza Wan Mahmud. Saya daripada pelajar PhD daripada UKM. Okay, sekejap. Macam mana saya nak... Okay, sorry. Okay, pengenalan ialah saya mengkaji buat kajian ini berkaitan dengan organisasi awam di Malaysia yang merupakan satu kumpulan organisasi yang terbesar di Malaysia yang ini lebih kurang 1.6 juta penjawat awam. Ini saya ambil statistik ni daripada Utusan Malaysia 2001. So organisasi awam ini juga adalah bertindak untuk menyampaikan perkhidmatan kerajaan yang berkesan kepada masyarakat Malaysia, dan ia juga telah mengalami banyak proses perubahan urus takbir kepada yang terkini sekarang. Yang popular adalah kepimpinan transformasi pada masa sekarang. Jadi penyataan masalah saya adalah saya ingin melihat bahawa kepimpinan transformasi di Malaysia sentiasa memang dikaji oleh setiap pengkaji-pengkaji lain, namun itu kajian kepimpinan transformasi dalam organisasi awam di Malaysia dalam bentuk sorotan literature bersistematik kurang dikaji oleh pengkaji-pengkaji yang lepas. Jadi saya ambil inisiatif ini untuk mengkaji apakah yang patut diketengahkan dalam kajian sistematik sorotan sistematik literature. Okey, objektif kajian saya adalah untuk bertujuan mengenal pasti kepimpinan transformasi dalam konteks pelaksanaannya dalam organisasi awam di Malaysia. Kemudian saya membuat satu soalan kajian saya melihat itu apakah kepimpinan transformasi yang dilaksanakan dalam organisasi awam di Malaysia. Jadi di sini metodologi yang saya gunakan adalah kajian kepimpinan mengenai kepimpinan transformasi dalam organisasi awam di Malaysia dianalisis menggunakan kaedah sorotan literature bersistematik atau dipanggil sebagai SLR, dalam bahasa Inggerisnya Systematic Literature Review. So dalam kajian ini saya melihat membahagikan kepada 4 tahap kaedah SLR yang dilaksanakan, iaitu pertama pengenalpastian, identification, kemudian saya telah membuat saringan, screening, kemudian saya meletakkan kelayakan artikel-artikel yang memang relevan dengan tajuk ini, dan juga saya memasukkan itu inclusion. Dan ini merupakan saranan daripada Mentis et al. 2019. Okey, pada peringkat awalnya, pada peringkat pertama, pembahagian peringkatnya pengenalan iaitu saya telah mengenal pasti pengenalan beberapa kata kunci yang digunakan untuk mengenal pasti artikel yang relevan dalam kajian ini. So daripada kata kunci itu yang dipilih adalah kepimpinan, transformasi dan juga Malaysia. Dan juga saya meletakkan juga kepimpinan. Sebab itu dan menurut apa yang saya telah buat, saya melihat ia adalah satu kesukaran sebab melihat kepada dua pengkalan data yang begitu besar dalam kajian ilmiah. Jadi penggunaan istilah alternatif juga digunakan dengan menggunakan istilah bahasa Melayu itu kepimpinan. Jadi perkataan N dimasukkan dalam kata kunci untuk menemukan pelbagai penemuan yang lebih luas dan memperluaskan carian ke dalam kajian khususnya mengenai kepimpinan, transformasi dan operator ataupun untuk menampung ejaan alternatif ataupun sinonim. Ini menurut Aliyu 2017 dan juga Kitchenham pada 2004 seperti jadual di bawah. Okey, jadi saya telah membuat rintitan kajian. Ada dua pengkalan yang terbesar yang kita selalu gunakan dalam bahagian kajian ilmiah iaitu World of Science, iaitu saya menggunakan TS Leadership, Transformational or Leadership, Transformational and Malaysia. Okey, kemudian saya gunakan pengkalan lagi satu, pengkalan data yang besar juga yang lagi satu iaitu Scopus. Saya menaik title -ABS-K and then keyword dia saya gunakan Leadership, Transformational or Leadership, Transformational and also saya gunakan Malaysia. Dan namun begitu apa yang saya dapati adalah okey, maaf saya terlajak. Okey, namun begitu saya merasa hampa dalam kajian tersebut sebab nanti saya jelaskan sebentar lagi. Tinjauan dalam kajian ini bergantung kepada dua pengkalan data jurnal utama dan satu pengkalan alternatif. Maksudnya saya mencari dari sudut Scopus dengan laman web www.scopus.com home URI yang paling utama. Kemudian saya cari juga dalam Web of Science WOS iaitu yang utama. Untuk makluman semua, untuk kajian sorotan literature bersistematik, kita memang menggunakan dua pengkalan yang besar yang utama sebab ia adalah pengkalan yang memang banyak kajian-kajian oleh pengkaji-pengkaji lepas sama ada antarabangsa atau Malaysia menulis tentang kajian tentang transformasi, kepimpinan transformasi. Dan akhir sekali saya gunakan alternatif itu Google Scholar. Okey, pengkalan data saya yang saya telah cari untuk telah mengindeks Web of Science telah mengindeks lebih kurang 2,840 jurnal yang berkaitan dengan kepimpinan transformasi. Scopus pula telah mengindeks lebih kurang 84,369 berkaitan dengan jurnal kepimpinan transformasi dan hanya 666 jurnal yang berkaitan dengan kepimpinan transformasi di Malaysia. Namun begitu, Google Scholar juga telah mengindeks 1,770 berkaitan dengan jurnal kepimpinan transformasi organisasi awam di Malaysia. Namun begitu, okey, menurut Zahwo 2014, dia mengatakan bahawa tinjauan sistematik penggunaan beberapa pengkalan data akan menghasilkan keputusan yang tepat dan menghasilkan hasil lebih banyak artikel berbanding dengan menggunakan satu pengkalan data untuk meringkaskan pelbagai bidang yang berkaitan. Betul, saya setuju. Dan untuk penggunaan artikel, pencarian artikel dalam bahasa Inggeris leadership transformational, ya banyak. Younger juga 2010 mengatakan untuk meningkatkan kemungkinan mendapatkan artikel yang relevan. Betul, memang tidak dinafikan, memang terlalu banyak berdasarkan kepada indeks yang saya cari melalui dua pengkalan data yang utama dan satu pengkalan data alternatif. Namun begitu, dalam fasa saringan, okey, saya telah meletakkan beberapa kriteria dan eligibility atau kemasukan dan exclusion iaitu pengecualian. jenis yang saya cari, jenis literature adalah jurnal, artikel penyelidikan dari segi proses persidangan, dan exclusion pengecualian saya mencari tidak melihat kepada jurnal tinjauan sistematik, siri buku, buku, bab dalam buku. Bahasa yang saya cari dalam kajian ini, saya akan telah melihat kepada bahasa Melayu dan juga bahasa Inggeris. Rata-rata dalam pengkalan data yang utama, Web of Science dan juga Scopus, mereka menggunakan lebih banyak bahasa Inggeris dalam artikel-artikel tersebut. Dan untuk pengecualian, saya tidak melihat kepada bahasa-bahasa lain yang selain daripada bahasa Melayu dan juga bahasa Inggeris. Okey, jangka masa indeks yang saya cari adalah saya meletakkan 3 tahun sahaja untuk melihat ada tak perubahan dalam kepimpinan transformasi yang dilakukan oleh pengkaji-pengkaji yang lepas. Okey, untuk pengecualian saya tidak melihat 2017 ke bawah. Untuk indeks bila saya melihat kepada jurnal-jurnal petikan sains sosial, petikan kepimpinan, petikan organisasi, indeks petikan psikologi dan juga indeks petikan sains yang diperluaskan melalui Web of Science. Dan untuk pengecualian tidak adalah saya lakukan. Untuk diguna pakai, kecilnya saya menggunakan 2 keyword, itu kepimpinan dan transformasi. Untuk yang selain daripada itu saya tidak mencarilah artikel-artikel yang tidak meletakkan kepimpinan dan transformasi. Okey, kemudian langkah sorotan yang telah saya lakukan secara sistematik, ada 3 langkah. Saya memilih artikel kajian dengan mengeluarkan satu artikel kajian yang sama ataupun 2 duplikat paper yang telah dikenapasi, namun setelah dilihat dan dicari melalui kedua-dua pengkalan data yang besar, iaitu Web of Science dan juga Scopus, hanya ada saya melihat kepada 6 artikel sahaja dalam bahasa Inggeris. Itu betul-betul spesifik dalam melihat kepada kepimpinan transformasi dalam organisasi awam di Malaysia. Okey, kemudian saya melakukan proses awalan, itu screening, juga dilakukan ke atas 6 artikel dalam bahasa Inggeris tersebut. Memandangkan artikel-artikel lain yang tidak menjurus, tidak memfokus kepada organisasi awam di Malaysia. Langkah terakhir iaitu saya memasukkan artikel yang paling relevan yang mengandungi aktiviti kepimpinan transformasi yang sejajar dalam bidang kepimpinan transformasi organisasi awam di Malaysia. Kemudian saya telah melakarkan rajah untuk sorotan literature bersistematik, iaitu ini menurut daripada Prisma. Okey, saya telah merekodkan, saya kena alihkan sebab minta maaf sekejap, saya kena alihkan supaya tidak saya tak nampak. Okey, sebentar. Okey, dalam kajian dalam carta alih kajian literature bersistematik menurut Prisma, okey, kita ada pemasukan, kelayakan, saringan dan pengenalpastian. Pada asalnya rekod yang dikenalpasti melalui pencarian Scopus adalah 6, kalau menurut Web of Science adalah kosong. Kemudian rekod pendua yang dikeluarkan tiada. Kemudian rekod yang disaring adalah 6. Kemudian rekod dikecualikan pun tak ada, disebabkan kita tidak melihat kepada ulasan sistematik, siri buku, buku, bab buku dan juga yang bukan dalam bahasa Melayu dan juga bahasa Inggeris, dan juga yang diterbitkan di bawah tahun 2017. So artikel teks yang penuh, artikel teks penuh dinilai mematuhi atau memenuhi syarat yang kita ditetapkan menjawab kepada objektif dan persoalan kajian, maka artikel teks tersebut telah penuh dikecualikan dengan alasan tiada. So sebab saya tidak melihat kepada paper konsep dan juga systematic literature review yang lain dalam bidang kepimpinan transformasi. Kemudian kajian itu telah kajian yang saya cari 6 tadi, saya telah menganalisis melalui kaedah kualitatif. Kemudian seterusnya saya melihat kepada senarai, walau bagaimanapun senarai yang saya lihat kepimpinan, ketulisan, integriti, kualiti perkhidmatan dan juga kepercayaan masyarakat hanya keenam artikel tersebut hanya membincangkan tentang kepimpinan sahaja. Saya telah melihat kepada 6 artikel, iaitu penulis artikelnya Donny Adams dan Joseph M. Prelade pada tahun 2020. Organisasi yang dilihat adalah organisasi sekolah, bidang yang dikaji dan juga tema yang dikaji adalah kepimpinan. Dan yang kedua, artikel kedua, Samsudin et al. Pada tahun 2017, organisasi adalah yang dikaji adalah industri awam, bidang yang dikaji adalah kepimpinan, temanya adalah kepimpinan dan juga penulis yang ketiga adalah Adrian Paul Jarvis dan Pradeep Kumar Mishra pada tahun 2019 juga mengkaji tentang kepimpinan transformasi di universiti. Bidang yang dilihat adalah kepimpinan, tema yang dilihat juga adalah kepimpinan. Dan yang keempat adalah Ibrahim Brother et al. 2020 melihat kepada organisasi awam. Dia melihat kepada kajian kepada kepimpinan dan juga tema yang dikaji adalah dari segi organisasi. Okey, yang kelima adalah Majid et al. Pada tahun 2018. Organisasi yang telah dikaji adalah organisasi awam, bidang yang dikaji adalah kepimpinan transformasi dan temanya adalah kepimpinan, dan akhir sekali adalah Rohana Ahmad dan Mazi Saad 2019. Bidang yang dikaji adalah organisasi awam, bidangnya adalah kepimpinan dan temanya adalah kepimpinan. Ini saja yang menjurus kepada tajuk yang saya ingin kaji, iaitu kepimpinan transformasi dalam organisasi awam di Malaysia. Okey, so daripada hasil dapatan saya, hanya yang saya melihat kepada Prisma, hanya saya melihat kepada 6 artikel yang dipilih untuk mewakili aktiviti dan bidang yang berkaitan dengan kepimpinan transformasi dalam organisasi awam di Malaysia. Namun begitu, dia hanya melihat satu tema saja, kepimpinan, dan subtema dia adalah karismatik, motivasi, rangsangan intelektual dan juga pertimbangan individu. Okey, seterusnya. Okey, dapatan dan perbincangan. Hasil daripada dapatan sorotan literatur bersistematik tersebut hanya menunjukkan 6 kajian yang berjaya dikenal pasti dalam kepimpinan transformasi organisasi awam di Malaysia. Jadinya apabila saya melihat tema yang saya buat awalan dahulu, dia tidak hanya mencakupi dapatan kajian untuk persoalan kajian saya, iaitu kepimpinan transformasi yang dijalankan dalam organisasi awam sama ada di peringkat universiti atau jabatan, dengan melihat tema dalam kepimpinan itu sendiri, itu karismatik, pertimbangan individu, motivasi dan juga rancangan intelektual daripada ke-6 artikel yang telah dipilih. Okey,
it's time. Okay.
Okey, kesimpulannya, ulasan sorotan literatur bersistematik ini bertujuan adalah untuk menyumbang kepada pengetahuan serta mampu memberi pencerahan melalui analisis tentang kepimpinan transformasi organisasi awam dan juga integriti. Namun begitu, apa artikel yang saya dapati, kedua-dua pengkalan itu tidak melibatkan integriti. Mungkin integriti dibincangkan daripada aspek lain. Berdasarkan pencarian kajian yang lepas yang dilakukan oleh pengkaji, maka kajian ini relevan manakala masih belum banyak kajian sorotan literatur bersistematik yang ditemui memfokuskan kepada kepimpinan transformasi khususnya dalam organisasi awam di Malaysia. Sekian saja pembincangan saya ucapkan terima kasih.
Thank you, Ms. Fazura. Also, please add them in chat room, and we be able to answer some of them during the Q&A if any question. Okay, let's go to presenter number 3. Please welcome Ms. Duan Kwan. She is a PhD student, Modern Language and Communication, University Putra, Malaysia, with a title, A Qualitative Thematic Analysis of Malaysians and Immigrants' Sentiment Towards China During COVID-19 Pandemic Context. Okay, please welcome.
hold on, share my screen. Sorry, there's something wrong with my computer. Okay. Okay, hi everyone. So glad to be here and meet you guys online. And sorry I couldn't put the background due to the technical problem. My name is Duan Kwan from China, and I'm a PhD candidate of University of Puchong, Malaysia. Today I'm going to share with you guys our findings on comparative analysis of the general impression of China and the COVID pandemic affected impression of China from the perspective of Malaysia and immigrants in Malaysia. As we know that in
Miss Pandu, I think your slide is short.
So this is not the okay. Oh, there's some. It's okay.
Okay, this one okay.
Oh, this one's okay. Sorry. Oh, but it didn't move. I can't change. Oh, yeah. So as we know that in 2019, as the COVID-19 spread around the world, it inevitably became a constant change and caused in the international community's impression on China. And before COVID-19 epidemic outbreak, the residents of stakeholder countries had a multidimensional perception of China's national image because they could learn everything about China from different channels, such as they could visit China and they could make friends with Chinese people, and they have different ways to learn China. But during this pandemic, the only ways they can learn everything about China is media. They could only depend on the media environment to learn everything about China. And we know that the famous American politician Liebman first introduced the concept of pseudo environment in his book Public Opinion. It talking about that the media could reconstruct this reality by precising, choosing, and reconstruct everything about specific things. So research shows that the country image as a cognitive representations that holds about the foreign country. Research shows that the country image as a cognitive representation that a person holds about a given country has magnificent effects of the success of a country's business, trade, tourism, and diplomatic relations, because it affects the behavior of central stakeholders aboard. And so I want to explore during this pandemic how the Malaysians view China, and how the immigrants live in Malaysia view China, and how their sentiments or views on China was affected by this pandemic. And why I choose Malaysia, because I think Malaysia is a culturally diverse and tolerant country that has attracted many immigrants from around the world to settle here. I am an international student here, and I have a lot of international classmates here, and all of them from different countries. And I lived in KL, and I also have a lot of I know a lot of different people and from different countries, they have different opinions about China. But sometimes when I have a conversation with them, I usually wonder why they have the different views about China. What caused them to build the view about China? So although immigrants live in Malaysia, but the social factors that they are exposed to are different from the Malaysians. Because for Malaysians, most of them, they live there for a very, very long time, and they were exposed to the Malaysian media environment. But for the immigrants, they only live in Malaysia just for several years, or not a very long time compared to their whole life. So they exposed to the immigrants and the Malaysians, both of them exposed to the Malaysian media environment, but both of them, they could check or browsing the news from the Western media. To explore the influence of external factors on participants' perception by compared to groups of participants who live in the same society but from the different background, I think it's a very interesting and research that could help me to explore why different people could have the different view on China, especially during this pandemic. And my general objective is to explore the influence of external factors on participants' perception by comparing two groups of participants who live in the same society but from different backgrounds. As to specific objectives, first, I want to explore the views of Malaysians and immigrants in Malaysia towards China during COVID-19 pandemic. And second, to compare their general impressions of China and their impressions on China in COVID-19 context in Malaysia. And the third, to explore the relevant media topics that influenced their sentiments regarding China. And as to the method of the study, qualitative semantic analysis was applied for the data analysis process, and some structured interview was adopted. And it's an in-depth interview, so it's a purposive sampling. I'm going to find some participants that they have the habits to browse news from Malaysian media and also from the Western media. And my participants are Malaysians and immigrants in Malaysia, and they should live in Malaysia during this pandemic from the 2019 December to July 2021. There's a mistake. It should be 2021, not 2022. And I published the recruitment on the social media. And then some participants, volunteers contacted me that I will have the short conversation with them to check whether they are suitable for my research. So I selected eligible participants by phone conversation and emailed the participants the interview guideline and fixed the online interview time. So the interview was audio recorded and the transpiration. And then after the interview finished, I will transfer the audio documents into transcripts, and then I will email back these transcripts to my participants to get their confirmation. So after get their approval, I will analyze the data with the qualitative software Atlas TI. So codes were assigned to units of meaning in the interview data. Open coding performed, followed by the Excel coding. So as to the results, first, I'm going to introduce the background of my participants. Five from abroad and 5 Malaysians. For the immigrants in Malaysia, there is one from Ireland, one from Syria, one from American, and one from South America, one from Bangladesh. And for the Malaysian participants, there are 2 of them are Indian Malaysians, and 1 is Dusun, and 2 Malay. So they are young people. Both of them, they're young, and they have the daily browsing news platforms. All of them, they both check the Western media platform like BBC, and AG, and both of them will check the local media platform like Malay Mail, Malaysia Guinea, and the Star. So as to the immigrants, from my analysis, there are the sub-themes. They are the same. Their views about China, about their general impression about China could be separated to 3 main themes, which are political impression, soft power impression, and economic impression. And for Malaysians, they have the same views on China like immigrants. But the differences is for immigrants, which impressed them most is China's political impression. And most of them have the negative views on China's political impression. So, but for Malaysians, most impressed impression of China to Malaysians are economic impression, and they have the good comments on China's development, economic development, and then followed by the political impression, soft power impression. As to Malaysian participants' views on China, their political impression, their views on political impression are mixed. They have the positive comments and also have the negative comments. And the impression as to the impression on China under the COVID-19 pandemic, the immigrants, their views on China could be grouped into 2 main themes, which are the information transparency information and anti-academic performance impression. But as to immigrants, they have a very negative views on China's information transparency because they think during the early stage of this pandemic, China's government, they didn't publish the clear information, and they thought China covered some aspects of this pandemic, like the numbers and new cases, the death numbers. So they have a very negative views on China during the early stage, but they also admit that China did something right on anti-pandemic, because they still have the very critical comments on this part, because they cannot tell whether these news are real, because from the Western media, the participants told me that they don't believe that China government published the real situation, even though they checked some news about the pandemic situation currently about China, that the Chinese government said they have a good control, and a lot of people, they could back to normal life currently, but they still have the spectacle thinking about this part. But for Malaysian participants, they still have the negative comments on the information transparency about China, but most impressed for them of China is anti-pandemic performers. So that's the big differences from Malaysian participants with immigrants living in Malaysia. So what impressed the immigrants most was the political, as to the discussion. So what impressed the immigrants most was the political impression of China, and whereas the Malaysian participants' political impression about China was mixed. And the Malaysian participants were most impressed by economic impression of China. Most of them are positive, and immigrants didn't pay much attention to China's economic development achievements. And the soft power of China made a stronger impression on the immigrants participants. They show a big interest on Chinese people, Chinese culture, and Chinese food. And both groups of participants agreed that China's information was not transparent enough in the early stage of this pandemic, and felt that this had a very negative impact on China's image. And for immigrants in Malaysia, what impressed them more was that there were negative topics related to China, such as the, Wuhan Dr. Li Wenliang, such as this and the new cases and the situations currently. And the Malaysian interviewees were mostly impressed by China's successful control in this pandemic. So as to the conclusion, I think the news reading habits influence the audience perceptions because and as to the Malaysian participants, their news reading habits were dominated by the local media and supplemented by Western media. But for the immigrants living in Malaysia, their news reading habits were opposite. They were dominated by the Western media and supplemented by the local media. And I think a good diplomatic relations also have a positive impact on the perception of nationals of the stakeholder country, because we know that China and Malaysia, they have a long story, good relationship. And these two countries are so close, and the people living in Malaysia, the Malaysians, they have a good inherent cognition of China that help them could be affected by the positive news of China, but the negative news. So that's all I want to share. Thanks for your time and attention, and thanks to the holder.
Thank you, Ms. Tuan Kwan. I hope you all enjoyed this amazing presentation. So for the last presenter for today, please welcome Mr. Zul Imran bin Ahmad, PhD student, Faculty of Social Science and Humanity, and also UKM, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, with the title New Level, Unlock Current Problematic Gaming Preventive Measure and Future Approach in Asia, a systematic review. Please welcome Mr. Zul.
Haslina, there's no audio.
Give me a minute.
Thank you, Haslina. Sorry for the technical problem. Sorry.
New Level Unlock, Current Problematic Gaming Preventive Measures and Future Approach in Asia, a systematic review. Introduction. Internet Gaming Disorder, IGD, is a World Health Organization, WHO, recognized mental disorder that being developed from already existed problematic gaming, PG. PG needs to be tackled from early stage by any means necessary, including prevention approaches. However, most of the prevention methods were not proven to be effective nor suitable for action. PG impact was exacerbated when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and forced communities to rely on digital devices at home. Children and adolescents becoming more vulnerable to uncontrolled device use. The emergence of amateur clinics that offer unethical solutions such as electric shocks and the use of unapproved drugs. Due to these reasons, scattered prevention research across Asia must be compiled and analyzed to spark future studies. Objective. This review is to compile and analyze all related PG prevention strategies from Asian region. This study consists of three main objectives. Number 1, to locate, gather and screen related literature from leading journal databases by using PRISMA protocol. Number 2, to analyze and segregate any data available, especially the recommended prevention methods. Number 3, to synthesize prior results on what that have not been done or covered in order to reveal the gaps for future prevention. Data methodology. The PRISMA resources, inclusion and exclusion criteria, systematic review process and data abstraction are used for analysis. PRISMA is an established protocol to guide author in publishing caliber studies. It allows author to discover and synthesize potential literature from leading journal databases using organized, transparent and reputable procedures. These include three filtering stages, namely identification, screening and eligibility for quality appraisal. Articles were identified from advanced searching in three journal databases such as Scopus, Web of Science and Google Scholar, resulting 991 articles. The inclusion criteria: original Asian PG prevention studies, written in English, from subject area of social science, psychology, arts and humanities, from the year between 2015 and 2021. Article excluded were reviewed articles, book series, book, chapter in book and conference proceeding. Final 18 articles has meet screening and eligibility requirement for systematic analysis. Results and finding. There are equal number of studies covering themes of parents and family prevention and clinical, with each of them had 7 studies. Second most focused team discovered is self-control prevention as much as 6 studies. Research on policy and technology restrictions and school-based team did not get much attention with only 2 studies each. Most studies emphasizing parents' supervision, interpersonal relationship, self-control motivation and counseling for prevention methods. Out of 18 studies, 5 of them was originated from Southeast Asia countries. Surprisingly, Malaysia had only 1 study and yet to produce any since 2015. Implication for research policy. This study is important for empirical and practical reasons. First of all, out of 3 Asian countries recognized by the United Nations, only few took part by producing a handful of studies since 2015, signaling the dire need for more attention. Secondly, it is crystal clear that communication media is still not identified as a potential prevention mediator, although it has been widely practiced without any empirical backup. Future studies can be directed to explore the use of traditional and new media, in particular public service announcements or PSA. Awareness campaign through media is likely to provide cognitive and effective impact. Thank you so much for your interest and attention. If anyone has any question, please feel free to ask now and I will do my best to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Zuimran, for a great presentation, and also thank you to all our presenter today. Now let's go to Q&A. If you have additional question for presenter, you can ask them in the chat box featured in the conference platform, or you can raise your hand and unmute your mic and presenter may answer to you. Okay.
Hello.
Open the floor.
Hi.
Yes. Okay.
I have a question for Miss Kuan Duan. Okay.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, can I ask my question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Actually, I agree. Do you think that the recent China military expansion and activity in Southeast Asia has contributed to the current impression by Malaysian locals and immigrants?
Sorry, could you speak a little bit slowly? The internet is choppy just now. Okay,
all right.
Sorry.
Okay, I repeat my question. Do you think that the recent China military expansion and activity in Southeast Asia has contributed to the current impression by Malaysian locals and immigrants?
May I repeat your question that you are asking that the Asia media did some contribution to influence Malaysians and immigrants' views on China, right?
Actually, I'm referring to the current Chinese military expansion and activity in Southeast Asia. So do you think that this activity is contributing to the current impression?
Actually, this is a very sensitive topic. So, you know, I want to talk about something about the current situation. In mainland China, actually, our media, we didn't focus too much on the military conflicts with Malaysia. That's not our focus point. But I could check some, I checked the news from media platform from Malaysia and Western media and also mainland China media. So I could tell the differences. In mainland China, our media, we didn't focus military conflict with Malaysia. So our people, we couldn't feel these conflicts. Then we don't have any views influenced by such kind of news. But I think the people in Malaysia, a lot of them, during the conversation with the locals, and I could tell that they have a strong point about this part. So maybe they could influence their thinking about China. So they think their impression about the diplomatic impression about China, most of them are negative. But that's not the dominant views on Malaysians. The dominant views on China for Malaysians is economic development impression about China. Most of Malaysians, they have a positive views on this part, but they still have the negative views on the military impression on China as well. But during this pandemic, I also did some research on the news related to China from the Malaysia Guinea. And I checked a lot of news are talking that during this pandemic, China's government is willing to help Malaysia and send the medicine help and show some experience to Malaysians how to fight with this pandemic. And the negative views, they focus on the currently situation. So maybe the media let them forget some aspect about the military conflict, but it's temporary. If after this pandemic, if the media they still focus on the military conflicts, maybe during this short time, the Malaysians' perception towards China gonna be negative. So I think it depends on how media emphasize this topic during this time.
Okay.
Yes,
that's all.
Yes, I agree with Kuan Ju, and that the media perception of media is most important to role what the issue. Okay. So any question for participant? Is there any question? Okay, I have one question to Associate Professor Dr. Aida. Okay, Doctor. The media is an important communication in the delivery of information. What is the view of Doctor that role of public media in COVID information delivery in Malaysia now?
What's the view?
Yeah.
My view on it.
Yeah.
I think, okay. I did another study on Twitter, and then it looked at the Ministry of Health's communication on COVID. And of course, I've been, reading on COVID here and there. I think perhaps we need to have like a positive way of communicating, that will make us more motivated, because I think we do feel demotivated in the current situation that we're in. And I think we need to be inspired. We need to have a little bit, be motivated. So I think the writing needs to bear in mind that we have increased cases of suicide, you know what I mean? Increased cases of people who are depressed. Children are falling off buildings, you know what I mean? You're not even sure what these parents are doing. Maybe they're so busy looking for, making a living that they can't even afford child. We don't know what's happening in their lives, but it doesn't seem to be very good. So there's a lot of scary news around. And one thing about Malaysia, I noticed there's the crime rate is possibly not as high as other countries, but because we have this agenda setting, we focus a lot on the crime rate, on the crime, we put it on the front page, like whatever. We tend to think, and other people reading that tend to think that there's a lot of crime. Whereas there are countries like Tanzania, for example. My students from Tanzania, she said they don't even report COVID cases there. Can you imagine? They don't even report. Yeah.
Really?
So
Okay.
yes, they don't know what's happening. They don't have to get vaccinated. Only if they enter Mecca or something like that. They go to a different country. Then if it's required, then they get vaccinated. If not, it's just like every day. So every other day. So they said that we're not quite sure what's happening. And that's the power of the media, isn't it? To downplay, to upplay, to focus, frame to frame, positives, negative, negative agenda, positive agendas. And I think we need to relook at how do we motivate Malaysians during this COVID situation better. I think that's what we need to look at. Yeah.
Yes, agree, Doctor. Yes, very agree. Okay. Anything? Any else? Anyone else? Question for Ms. Fazura, for Mr. Zul Imran, Ms. Kwanduan? Yeah? No. Okay. So okay, I think if no question, then I will be close this session. Thank you for the excellent presentation.
All right.
Thank you again. Okay, so yeah, thank you again, Associate Professor Dr. Aida Mokhtar from International Islamic University Islam Malaysia, Ms. Fazurah binti Mustafa from University Bangsa Malaysia, also Ms. Duan Kuan from University Putra Malaysia, and also Mr. Zul Imran Ahmad from University Kebangsaan Malaysia for the great presentation. It was a pleasure to have you with us. So let us give applause to presenter. Okay, so the conclude the season. Thank you all for attending. We hope you have learned and enjoyed this presentation. On behalf of Team MENTION, we apologize if there were any mistake and error while handling this session. To Ms. Sharon, I pass this floor to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zaidi. Thank you, everyone. So with that, we end our parallel session for this evening, and that will be the final part of our session today. So before we really end the session, I would like to say again, thank you, Mrs. Zaidi, all the presenters and the participants for enlightening and fruitful discussion. So before that, can we have a photo session? If those that are, you don't mind, you guys can turn on your camera. We can have a photo session. The participant also can turn on their camera. All right. Okay. All right, in a count of 3, everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right. Okay, so after this session, actually we finished the session at 6 o'clock, but they still have time here. So that's it for our session. But if you want to go another breakout room to wish to watch or listen to other people's presentation, you may go. And after that, you guys can return to the main room and we'll do the closing ceremony. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening. Nice meeting all of you guys. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good luck, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.